you've already talked upon GDPR, so it's probably useful to start there. GDPR is going to apply, isn't it?
Yeah, so GDPR, and you'll often hear people use.
And just to take a step back, GDPR.
Oh, now I can't even remember what it stands for now. It's General Data Protection Regulation. So it's the law. It used to be called Privacy Law, but then everyone started calling it GDPR, which is sort of naming the law after the legislation. In effect, we did have a piece of data protection legislation in the UK, Data Protection Act. I think it was 1998, and it's sort of it's very similar to the law that was there. What it's trying to do is to make sure that people's personal data is in effect safe and secure, so it can't be hacked and used for any kind of identity theft, that your most personal data, if it is being used, or to use the language of the legislation, processed, that it's being processed in a way that you have given consent to. And the big change when they introduced that legislation was that in the past, most of the consent, or a lot of the time, people would try and argue that it was consent by implication, that, I've given somebody my personal details for whatever, I'm ordering something online, therefore the implication is that I bought something from that company. It's implied that they can use that data to sell me something else.
And now it's all about legitimate interests rather than pure consent, and pure consent being, actually, yes, I've said you can use my data for this, and it's very specific.
Well, you need it. It's around express consent and having a legitimate interest for using that data, and not using it for purposes that the person hasn't given that express consent for. This is where it gets interesting for data for the when it comes to artificial intelligence. So I am told lots of people. Lots of the AI bots have been trained on data that is out there in the internet.
And when you said trained?
It means that it scans it in, it gets the software to sort of read and understand what's being said. So again, if it would look at lots of online recipe pages to work out how you cook a chili con carne. And it would know the different variances of chili con carne and what you needed to do for a spicy chili and what you needed to do having with a mild chili and everything in between. Now, all of those people who have published their online recipes, to the extent that they are original works, that they're special secret, they've done something slightly different, so that it's got that scope of originality that is protected by the law of by the law of copyright. If the AI bot is reading that in effect to train it to be trained so it knows and can recognise what a chili con carne is, well, actually, it's reading the work or the data that is owned by somebody else. Now, that's one thing for chili con carne, which would be around the law of intellectual property, and but it's something quite different when it is people's personal information that they've given over for one purpose, and now all of a sudden that's been fed into the AI bot to work out all sorts of different things.
And again, with personal data, you've got a potential issue as to where it's been stored, haven't you? Because if you're suddenly shoving data into an AI bot, and that AI bot's now based in America, suddenly you've disclosed and used data and sent it to another country, haven't you? So
and it's much harder for you to enforce your rights in a different jurisdiction,
and potentially have created, whoever the owner of the AI bot is, some sort of property in that data which was never intended when the data was given over. So I think what we're saying here is that actually, yes, AI has its place, and yes, it's there, but those who are using it have got to be very careful as to not breach the GDPR.
And I think that what a lot of what some of the software companies have realised is that is a challenge, and one of their workarounds is in effect to try and use technology to anonymise the data, so that even if you wanted it to write a letter of resignation, I'm writing my letter of resignation to you. And if I put your name into the chat GPT, and I put your job title and even your address and where you work and all of that stuff, I mean, I'm using your personal data and my own personal data when I'm drafting that letter, and it will draft me a very professional sounding letter at the end of it. Some of the providers, I certainly know that this is true of the Microsoft products, Copilot, and I think some of the Apple Intelligence software. It will never send. It recognises that Jason Alcock is a name, and that does not leave your device. It's an anonymised name is sent into the cloud. When it comes back with the answer, it knows that the anonymised name, the pseudonym, is you, and the device then does something so that it is written as a letter back to you. So the data, your name and that personal data, often will not, as some of the existing technology, will not leave the device that you're using it on.
Which in turn means there's probably other challenges about what have you installed on your computer and what's it doing, potentially. Because there must be some encryption or code that's telling it to do that when it's coming through that gateway.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but I think it's less challenging if that personal data is not leaving the device that's sat on your desktop or is sat in your hand. I mean, that is you own that. If it doesn't get sent out there, then I don't see that as challenging. That's one of the sort of workarounds that the software providers have come up with to try and stop, GDPR breaches in effect, or data protection breaches, so that actually your personal data is not being sent into the cloud, is not getting sent to the United States of America or anywhere else in the world where you would have difficulty enforcing your data protection rights. I do think that that's a more recent development, and I'm told that a lot of the software, the AI bots as they're often called, has been the information that is already on the internet. It's been sending its bots to read that data and use that data, and the law will catch up with that eventually. But as it stands, where there is an absence of regulation, some of that is perfectly lawful, and and even if it's not, they're not telling anyone that that's how they've trained their AI bots. So very difficult for anyone to find out. Very similar to sort of the early days of the internet, when there was a lot of copyright infringement around musical works, Napsters and LimeWires and all those companies were in existence. Lots of copying of people's photographs and images, which was made very easy by the internet. Right click, save as, use that photograph, on your own personal web page. I mean, that was copyright infringement, but it was very, very seldomly, until relatively recently, was very seldomly enforced.